So, back when I was starting out as a professor, there was a faculty meeting and I spoke with this professor of criminology. He was supposedly an expert on the mafia. And I'm very, very interested in the mafia. And I was extremely interested in it back then. Anyway, he said mafiosos don't really work. He was referring to the Italian-American mafia. Mafiosos don't really work. They never really work. They're just parasites. Well, okay, first of all, the term parasite in this context is ambiguous, okay? So, sure, the mafia, obviously they're parasites in a purely financial sense. I mean, they're robbers, they're thieves, that's what they do. So they are parasites in that sense. But there is another sense in which they are the opposite of parasites, and in which their entire existence is about non-parasiticism. So, if you actually consider some bureaucrat like this supposed mafia expert whose work turned out to be execrable and who was not really doing anything of substance at all. In fact, he was actually obfuscating things. But if you actually consider the average kind of pseudo-professor or bureaucrat, they are parasites in the sense that their identities are parasitic on those of the institutions that they serve. They don't really have their own identities. They are the ultimate parasites. And as it happens, they are also parasites in a financial sense, and in a much deeper sense. I mean, they are the sense in which they are financial parasites is much deeper and much more destructive and insidious and pervasive than the sense in which mafiosos were financial parasites when they were around. So the mafia was never had so much as a sheen of legitimacy. They were just criminals, period. Criminals are utterly dangerous, far more dangerous than people know. But they are seen for what they are. And even though they can do damage, it's a very obvious kind of damage, and it's the kind of damage that the police can contain very easily, relatively easily. But the kind of damage that is done by an institution that was once good but has now become bad, or by an institution that is half good and half bad, or by an institution that was never good but is formally indistinguishable from one that was good, the kind of damage that can be done by that kind of institution and the drain that it exerts on the economy and on the cultural realities of which the economy is a mere manifestation is far worse than the tax levied on society by the likes of the mafia. But again, the first point is really the more significant one, which is that the mafiosos, what really struck me about them was that they were agents. Okay, so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and it was about Carmine Galante. Now, Carmine Galante was briefly the boss of the Bonanno crime family. This was one of the big 5 Italian-American mafia crime families in New York. And Carmine Galante, he supposedly took an IQ test in prison in the 50s, and supposedly his IQ was that of a retarded person. Okay, but here's the thing, which is that, so he went to jail for being a huge heroin trafficking ringleader. Went to jail for 12 years. He was stuck in solitary confinement a lot of the time. He got out, and on the basis of the very few and far between contacts he had while in prison with the outside world, during his brief little encounters with visitors, he was able, once he got out, within a couple of weeks, to put together this enormously intricate and enormously successful international heroin ring. And it was, when you actually learn about the details, it was sophisticated. And he put it together. He was there in a box for 12 years. And he got out. He was there basically just pacing in his cockroach-infested, dank cell, and then he got out and immediately made this happen. And when I look at the professors that I've had to deal with, they did nothing. You could give them an opportunity, and they could not do it. They could not do anything unless they were specifically instructed, very explicitly, and many times over by the institutions in question to do it. They could do nothing. And, you could say, oh, well, they're just being obstreperous. They can act when it's necessary. No, I don't think so. They can't act. And I think that a lot of their pettiness, a lot of bureaucratic pettiness, is actually that they're paralytics who can do nothing. And what they can do is say no. So they do that. And that's actually, yes, it's largely about discharging hate, but it's also their kind of attempted little surrogate at action. So, no, yes, the mafiosos are bad people, but they are sufficiently agential to be bad, whereas this could not be said of this criminology professor, or frankly of pretty much anyone I've met in academia. And it was, and of course the question arises: was Carmine Galante actually retarded? Well, no, obviously he was not. Obviously he was not. I mean, he didn't want to take the test. I mean, the test was administered by some psychiatrist, so it was probably not even administered very intelligently. It was also, the psychiatrist was himself a twig and was probably envious. Well, was definitely envious of this person who had not lost his manhood. And that's really part of it. But Galante might well have been a brute, a dope even in many ways, but there was clearly something that he had not lost. I mean, so operating on the assumption that he was in fact not bright, which is a questionable assumption, but operating on that assumption for argument's sake, I guess the analysis would be: look, what's going to catch more rabbits, a low IQ bobcat or a high IQ house cat? Anyway, so no, this whole idea that that these people were parasitic is deeply misconceived, and it's, I think, almost a deliberate lie. Anyway, earlier I said that non-parasiticism is the very thing that the mafia was about. And let me explain what I mean. These people became criminals and outlaws because they wanted to hold on to their identities. They wanted to hold on to their agency, in much the way that this Galante fellow held on to his agency, and in precisely the way in which this criminology professor failed to hold on to his agency. And a lot of criminosis, which is the process of becoming a criminal, has to do with that.